Sister demanded access to my house, changed all locks, and security system alerts me when she drives by. My sister is standing on my porch with her palm flat against my front door, like she owns the hinges, and she's saying my name in that tone she's used since we were kids, half warning, half command, while my Ring camera is pinging my phone over and over with person detected. I can see her through the frosted glass, the outline of her shoulders tight, head tipped back like she's already rehearsed the speech. My hands are sweaty around my mug. I don't even drink coffee anymore because it spikes my anxiety, but I'm holding a mug anyway like it's an anchor. "Open up," she says again, louder. "I know you're in there. Don't do this." I don't answer, and in the silence I hear the soft thud of her fist on the wood. Once, twice, like she's testing whether I'll fold. I finally crack the door just enough to speak without letting her slip past me, the chain taut, and she immediately tries to push her shoulder into the gap like a reflex. I shove back, heart slamming, and she flashes this offended look like I'm the one being aggressive. "Seriously?" she says, staring at the chain. "You chained the door on me?" Her hair is pulled back tight. She's wearing that big tote bag she uses when she's in "I'm taking things" mode, and the sight of it makes my stomach drop. My voice comes out shaky and sharper than I mean it to. "What do you want, Nina?" She points down at the doorknob, like it's evidence. "I want the key," she says. "Or the code. Whatever you changed. You don't get to lock me out like I'm some stranger." This didn't start as some dramatic, we're dead to each other thing. It started as a spare key and a lot of tiny boundary crossings that I kept smoothing over because it felt easier than dealing with the explosion that comes when my sister doesn't get her way. Nina is older than me by 3 years and has always acted like that, makes her the senior partner in my life. Growing up, she was the one who decided what we watched, who we hung out with, what games we played. If she wanted something, she took it. If I complained, she'd call me dramatic, and then my parents would say, "You know how your sister is." Like that was a weather pattern I was supposed to dress for, not a person who could make different choices. Even as adults, she never really adjusted to the idea that I'm not her little brother she can manage with an eye roll and a guilt trip. I bought my house 2 years ago. It's not fancy. Small 3-bedroom in a normal suburb, a tiny backyard, one of those places where the living room and kitchen are basically one long rectangle. I was proud of it in a way I didn't even let myself say out loud because I was terrified of jinxing it. I saved. I worked extra shifts. I did the boring, responsible stuff. Nina, meanwhile, has lived in a permanent state of between situations, between jobs, between relationships, between apartments. Her life is always a temporary arrangement that somehow becomes everyone else's emergency when it falls apart. When I moved in, my mom insisted I give her a spare key in case something happens. Fine. Reasonable. Then Nina found out Mom had a key and started joking. "Well, obviously I need one too. I'm closer." I said no, laughed it off, changed the subject. Then one day Nina showed up while I was still unpacking, holding a key on my lanyard like it was a prize. "Mom gave it to me," she said breezily, as if she'd borrowed a pen. "Don't worry. I'll only use it if I need to." I remember staring at it, feeling this heat creep up my neck, and I wanted to tell her to hand it back right then. But Mom was standing behind her, smiling that nervous smile she does when conflict is about to happen, and I could practically hear the lecture. Don't be difficult. Don't make a big deal. Family helps family. So I let it slide. I told myself a key wasn't a big deal. I told myself Nina wouldn't actually use it. That lasted about 3 weeks. The first time she let herself in, I was in the shower. I heard the front door open, heard footsteps, and for a second, I genuinely thought someone had broken in. I grabbed the towel and stumbled into the hallway dripping, and Nina was in my kitchen like it was her own, rummaging through a bag. "Relax," she called when she heard me. "It's me." I stood there, half naked, furious, and embarrassed at the same time. "You can't just walk in," I said. She didn't even look up. "I knocked," she said. No one answered. I said, "Because I was in the shower." She shrugged like that was inconvenient for her, not a violation for me. "Well, I'm here now. I brought you a plant." She put a sad little fern on the counter like it excused everything. After that, it was constant little things. Nina would show up and let herself in just to drop something off. Nina would borrow my vacuum because hers broke again. Nina would use my bathroom because she was in the area and didn't want to use a public one. Sometimes I'd come home and the house would smell like her perfume, and I'd know she'd been inside when I wasn't there. When I confronted her, she'd grin and say, "I didn't touch anything. You're so paranoid." The word paranoid always landed like a dart because it made me question myself. Like maybe I was being too intense. Maybe this was normal family stuff. But I started noticing things that didn't add up. A drawer slightly open, a document I swear I left on the table moved to the side, my spare change jar looking lighter. Small enough to doubt, big enough to keep me tense. The big shift happened when she started acting like my house was a resource she could allocate. It sounds ridiculous writing it out, but that's what it felt like. She'd call and say, "Hey, my friend needs to crash for a night. I told her she can use your couch." Not ask, told. When I said no, she laughed like I was joking. "Don't be weird," she'd say. "It's one night. You've got space. I live alone. I don't have space. I have my life, my quiet, my safety." The idea of a stranger sleeping in my living room because Nina offered it like she was lending out a camping chair made my skin crawl. It escalated from there. Nina's latest boyfriend, some guy named Darren who always wore cologne that made my eyes water, started showing up with her. The first time, I opened my front door and he was behind her carrying a tool bag. I hadn't invited him. Nina said, "We're just going to fix that loose cabinet hinge for you. That S handy." I said, "I didn't ask for that." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're impossible. We're helping." And then they walked in like it was settled. Darren wandered around my kitchen, touching things, opening cupboards, peering into my pantry, and Nina chatted like we were having a normal visit. I watched him glance down my hallway toward my bedroom, and I felt this cold pinch of anger. That's my space. Not a show home. Not a community project. That was the first time I took the key back. I waited until Nina went to the bathroom, and I took it off her lanyard. When she came back out, she patted her pockets, frowned, and then her eyes snapped to me. "Did you take my key?" she asked, like I'd stolen her wallet. I held it up. "It's not your key," I said. "It's mine." Her face shifted instantly into this insulted rage. "Are you serious?" she said. "Mom gave it to me." I said, "Then Mom shouldn't have. I'm taking it back." Nina's voice got loud. "You don't trust me? After everything I've done for you?" I said, "Like what? Coming in unannounced? Offering my couch to strangers?" She threw her hands up. "You've changed," she spat. "You're not the same." I remember that moment so clearly because I almost caved. The guilt hit hard, that old childhood reflex where Nina is upset, and somehow that means I did something wrong. But then Darren, standing behind her, smirked. Actually smirked. Like this was entertainment. And the guilt evaporated into something solid. "Give me the key," Nina said again, stepping forward. "No," I said. She looked at Darren like she expected him to back her up. He did this little shrug and said, "It's his house." Nina whipped back to me, eyes blazing. "Fine," she said. "Then don't come crying to us when you need something." Then she stormed out, slamming my front door hard enough that my picture frames rattled. For about a week, things were quiet. I told myself, maybe that was it. Maybe she'd finally respect it. Then Mom called, voice tight. "Why are you causing drama with your sister?" she asked. I said, "I'm not causing drama." I took my house key back. Mom sighed like I'd said I was joining a cult. "She's upset," she said. "She feels like you're treating her like a criminal." I said, "Mom, she was letting herself into my house. She brought her boyfriend in without asking. She tried to offer my couch to a stranger." Mom's response was, she was only trying to help. That phrase again. Help. As if my boundaries were a personal attack on Nina's generosity. Then, 2 weeks later, I came home and my front door was unlocked. I know I locked it. I'm obsessive about it. I check it twice. It was unlocked. My stomach dropped. I pushed the door open slowly, expecting, I don't even know what. Nina was in my living room, sitting on my couch with her shoes off, feet tucked under her like she lived there. She had my spare key in her hand. "You're kidding," I said, voice flat with shock. Nina smiled like she'd won. "Mom gave me the other key," she said. "She said you were being stubborn." I just stood there, staring at my own house, my own couch, my sister sitting like a landlord. The anger hit so hard my vision went fuzzy. Get out, I said. Nina's smile didn't move. Don't be dramatic. Get out, I repeated louder. She stood slowly, like she was humoring me. I can't talk, she said. You can't just ban me from your life because you're on some power trip. I actually laughed because it was that or scream. A power trip? I said. You broke into my house. I didn't break in, she snapped. I had a key. And you shouldn't, I said. I held my hand out. Give it to me. She tucked it into her palm and closed her fist. No, she said, because you're being irrational. That word, irrational, always comes out when someone wants to paint you as the unstable one. It's Nina's favorite move. If she can make you sound unreasonable, she never has to admit she crossed a line. I said, you're in my house without permission. Give me the key or I'm calling the police. Her eyes widened like I'd threatened to set the place on fire. You wouldn't, she said. Try me, I said, and my voice was shaking now, but I meant it. Nina's mouth twisted. You're really going to do that to your own sister? I stared at her and felt something click into place. Not rage. Clarity. You're really doing this to me, I said quietly. You're really standing here trying to guilt me into letting you trespass. Nina's face flashed with anger, and for a second I thought she might throw the key at me. Instead, she shoved past me, shoulder-checking me hard enough that I stumbled back. She stormed out and flung the key onto my porch like it was trash. Fine, she screamed, turning back. Have fun being alone in your little fortress. Then she walked down my path, chin high, like she'd been wronged. I picked up the key off the porch with my fingers trembling. I went inside, locked the door, and slid down against it like my legs had stopped working. I sat there on the floor, staring at the deadbolt, and realized I didn't feel safe in my own house. Not because of a stranger, because of my sister and my mother's insistence that my home wasn't mine in the way I thought it was. That night, I changed the locks. All of them. Front door, back door, side gate. I didn't tell anyone. I just did it. I sat on the floor with the new hardware spread out like a surgery kit, watched a YouTube tutorial, and worked until my hand was sore. When it was done, I tested the keys over and over. Then I ordered a security system. Door sensors, motion detection, cameras. I felt a little ridiculous doing it, like I was playing pretend to being a serious adult. But the minute the first camera came online and I could see my porch from my phone, my shoulders dropped for the first time in weeks. Of course, Nina noticed immediately. 2 days later, she showed up, tried her old key, and I watched on the camera as she jiggled the handle harder and harder, like the lock was misbehaving. Then she slammed her fist against the door and shouted, "Open up!" The exact scene I started this with. When I didn't answer, she started calling. When I didn't answer, she called Mom. Mom called me. When I didn't answer Mom drove over. I opened the door that time because Mom is harder to ignore. She stood on my porch with Nina beside her, like an angry shadow. Mom's expression was that tight, disapproving look that says she's already decided I'm wrong. Why would you change the locks without telling us? She demanded. Because you gave Nina the spare, I said. Mom's mouth pressed into a line. I gave your sister a key because she's family. And I asked you not to, I said. And she used it to come in when I wasn't home. Mom, she was in my living room. Nina cut in. I was trying to talk to you because you were acting crazy. I felt my hands clench. Don't, I said low. Mom waved a hand like she was brushing away the details. You're making this bigger than it is, she said. Nina just wants access in case of emergencies. Nina nodded vigorously. Exactly. I looked at both of them and said, name an emergency. Nina blinked. What? Name an emergency you've had that required you to let yourself into my house when I wasn't there, I said. Because so far your emergencies have been using my bathroom, borrowing my vacuum, bringing Darren in to help, and sitting on my couch like you pay rent. Mom's face flushed. Don't speak to her like that. Then stop speaking about my house like it belongs to the group, I said. My voice was shaking, but I didn't back down. This is my home, not a family clubhouse. You don't get to hand out keys like party favors. Nina's eyes narrowed. So you're really locking us out. I'm locking you out, I said. Mom can come over when invited. But you don't respect you don't respect closed doors. Nina's voice went high. I'm your sister, and that's why this is so messed up, I said. because you think that word means you can do whatever you want. She stepped forward, pointing at me like I was on trial. You think you're better than us now because you have a house. I felt my chest tighten. That's not what this is. Yes, it is, she spat. You're making me look like some thief. You broke into my house, I said, and I could hear how calm I was, which honestly scared me, because it meant I'd passed the point of emotional bargaining. You don't get to be offended by the consequence. Mom looked between us like she couldn't compute that I wasn't folding. So what? We have to ask permission to come see you, she said like it was an insult. Yes, I said. That's how homes work. Nina laughed, sharp and nasty. Wow, listen to him. Permission. She leaned closer. What if I need to drop something off? What if I need to pick something up? What if you don't? I cut in. What if you stop inventing reasons to have access to my space? Nina's face changed then. The anger cracked, and something colder came through. Fine, she said. Then don't ask me for help ever again. I shrugged. Okay. That seemed to shock her more than anything. Nina is used to threats working. She's used to the idea that I'm desperate to keep the peace. While I didn't flinch, she looked to Mom for backup. Mom gave me this look like I'd just admitted to being heartless. I don't recognize you, she said softly. I hated how much that hurt, even though I knew it was manipulation. You do recognize me, I said. You just don't like the version of me that says no. They left in a storm of muttering and slammed car doors. I stood in my hallway afterward, staring at the new lock, and I felt both sick and relieved. Like I'd done something necessary, but irreversible. Then came the drive-bys. It started subtly. My driveway camera would ping, vehicle detected, and when I checked, it would be Nina's car easing past my house slower than normal. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then it happened again. And again. Always at weird times. Mid-afternoon on a weekday. Late evening. Early Saturday morning. Sometimes she wouldn't stop. Sometimes she would slow down and just linger like she wanted me to see her. Like she wanted me to feel watched. The security system I bought has this feature I didn't even think about at the time. It recognizes frequent vehicles. Not in some spy movie way, but enough that after a few passes it started labeling her car as familiar. Then, because I'm apparently now the kind of person who has a security app full of labels, I set a custom alert. Notify me when that vehicle is detected. I did it because I was sick of being startled. I wanted to know when she was around so I could decide whether to ignore it or brace myself. The first time the alert popped up, Nina's vehicle detected, my stomach dropped like I was back in high school hearing her stomp down the hallway toward my room. I hate that she still has that effect on me. I hate that, even after locks and cameras and all this adult control, a part of me still goes into that old survival mode. What is she going to do now? Sometimes she does nothing except drive by. Sometimes she parks down the street, and I catch her on the camera walking past my house like she's on a casual stroll, glancing at my windows. Once, she came up to the porch, rang the bell, and stood there staring straight into the camera lens like she was daring me to answer. I watched her on my phone from the kitchen, my hands shaking, and didn't move. She rang again, then again. Finally she shouted, "I know you're watching," like that was a gotcha. Then she left. The worst part is the family chatter that comes with it. My dad called me for the first time in months. Not to ask how I was, not to invite me for dinner, but to say, "Your mother is upset. Can you just smooth it over?" Smooth it over. That phrase makes my teeth hurt. Like I'm supposed to paint over mold instead of fixing the leak. Friends have been supportive, but even there I can hear the uncertainty when I explain it. Because on paper it sounds extreme. You put cameras up because your sister wants a key? It sounds petty until you say, "My sister used a stolen spare key to come into my house when I wasn't there and refused to give it back, and then try to make me the bad guy." Then people's faces change. Then they get it. The thing that messes with my head is the part of me that still wants to defend Nina. The part of me that still tries to turn it into something softer. She's just stressed. She's just used to being close. She's just worried. But then I remember her shoulder checking me on her way out. I remember her smirking boyfriend in my kitchen. I remember her holding my spare key in her fist and saying I was irrational. And I remember how small I felt in my own home because two people who were supposed to love me acted like my boundaries were a betrayal. A week ago, the system pinged again, Nina's vehicle detected. I checked the feed and saw her car parked across the street. Not moving, just sitting. I watched for a minute, my breath shallow. Then I saw her get out, walk to my mailbox, and open it. My mailbox. My hands went cold. I grabbed my shoes and walked to the door, then stopped with my hand on the handle. Because if I went out there, it would become a scene. She would twist it. She would scream about how she was just checking. She would make me look like the paranoid one again. I turned back into my house, grabbed my phone, and called a non-emergency police line. I felt ridiculous doing it. I felt like a snitch. I felt like I was betraying my own blood. But I also felt something else, steady. Like I was finally treating this like what it was, harassment. By the time an officer drove by, Nina was gone. The officer took my report anyway, listened quietly while I explained the history, nodded like he'd heard this story 100 different ways with different names. He said, "If she comes onto your property or interferes with your mail again, call us immediately." Then he added, gently, "You're allowed to have boundaries, mate, even with family." I stood in my driveway after he left, staring at my mailbox like it was suddenly fragile. I hated that this was my life. I hated that I was the guy with cameras and reports because his sister can't accept the word no. Later that night, Mum texted me. "Nina says you called the police on her." "I can't believe you do that. She was only checking if you got the Christmas card." I stared at the message until my eyes burned. Christmas card, right? That's why she parked across the street like a stakeout and opened my mailbox. That's why she's been circling my house like a shark. Because of a card. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just sat on my couch in my quiet house and listened to the faint hum of the security system and felt the strange peace of not participating in the gaslighting anymore. This morning, when the alert went off again and I saw Nina's car slow past my driveway, I didn't feel panic. I felt tired. Like my body finally understood she can drive by all she wants, but she can't get in. She can't rearrange my space. She can't take my keys. She can't turn my home into her extension. I know what this looks like from the outside. It looks like I'm cold, like I'm unforgiving, like I'm making a family issue into a legal one. But I also know what it feels like from the inside. It feels like finally being able to lock my door and mean it. It feels like breathing without waiting for footsteps in my hallway that I didn't invite. It feels like choosing my own safety over Nina's comfort for the first time in my life. And if that means my security system alerts me when she drives by, fine. Let it. At least now I know. At least now I'm not surprised. At least now I'm not living in a house that belongs to everyone except me.